so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
It's good for us, friends, to remember and meditate upon the goodness of God all week, but especially this morning as we begin worship. That is another song that we have not sung as a congregation yet together, but we hope to sing sometime in the future. It's on our Spotify worship list. This morning, as we begin worship, we're going to hear and actually go back and forth responsively, as you see on your screen, from Isaiah 61, words that Jesus, at least in part, the words that Jesus used to announce his ministry, and they connect to our beatitude this morning. So I'll read the leader portion. You at home read the all portion. I'll read it with you as well, and then we'll begin our worship. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to grant to those who mourn in Zion, to give them a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the garment of praise instead of a faint spirit, that they may be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified. I will greatly rejoice in the Lord. My soul shall exult in my God, for he has clothed me with garments of salvation. He has covered me with the robe of righteousness, as a bridegroom decks himself like a priest in a beautiful headdress, and as a bride adorns herself with her jewels. As we begin worship this morning with that call, Mez is going to join us and lead us in a song this morning.
Hey y'all, it's good to be with you. It's strange not being with you in person, as I know you guys have been doing this for a while, but it's just good to be here and enter into worship with y'all. So I want to continue to worship through song, and please feel free to sing in your homes, or if it needs to be something that it's more meditative. I mean, you know where you are. So please join along and sing Come As You Are. Sadness. Come out of sadness from wherever you've been. Come broken hearted, let rescue begin. Come find mercy, a sinner come to you. Earth has no sorrow, heaven can heal. Earth has no sorrow, heaven can heal. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, So lay down your burden, lay down your heart, come as you are. There's hope for the hopeless and all those who stray. You're seated at the table, come taste the grace. There's rest for the weary, rest that endures. Earth has no sorrow, heaven can cure. So lay down your burden, lay shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Who wander, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your burden, lay down your heart, come as you are. There's joy. There's joy for the morning. Oh, sinner, be still. Earth has no sorrow, heaven can heal. Earth has no sorrow, heaven can heal. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wander, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are. So lay down your burdens. So lay down your burdens. Lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wander, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart, come as you are. Amen. Amen.
Amen. That is a great song for us, particularly the way we're worshiping now, because so many of us are coming as we are, literally, right? Some of you are still in your PJs or are not dressed up, but of course there's a literal living out that is probably not as true when we go to Chickahominy, but is more true now, and it's obviously for us holistically, mind, body, and soul, to come as we are, to hear and meet Jesus in the midst. We have a few announcements this morning about kind of life in our community, and then we're going to hear from Aaron Holler. First, a great and joyous welcome. We have a new member of our community. Annie DeHart Peace was born on April 21st, as expected, the day she was supposed to come. She's doing well. Her mom's doing well. All the kids are doing well. It looks like Deacon Peace I saw was signed in this morning on somebody's screen. Annie was 19 3/4 inches long, 7 and 14.8 ounces. I'm going to go ahead and round her up to 15 ounces there. She's so close. Aaron Holler is actually organizing meals, and you can reach out to her about that, how to support the Peace family. Hopefully we'll see Annie and the Pieces sometime soon. So congratulations to them and to us as a church family to welcome her in and among the Pieces. A couple other announcements. I was a week early on this prayer email for webinar this Tuesday with Paul Miller because I'm so excited about it. So it's happening actually this Tuesday. So I'd love for you guys to log on there. He's certainly, and See Jesus and Paul Miller have been a big part of our ministry. We're using a lot of their material in student ministry this year. Another announcement is just an informational announcement that you could also, if you have questions about, we'd love for the elders or someone on finance team would get back to you. We wanted to let you guys know as a church, during these times, you've probably seen different things the government has offered to individuals and to organizations and companies. We actually applied for the Payment Protection Plan. It's a loan that turns forgivable if it's properly followed, and so it becomes sort of a grant of sorts. We applied a few weeks ago, and actually on the decision of the elders with consultation from the finance team, and we were approved, and that money is actually in our a new bank account that we have with Town Bank, slightly under $25,000. That will help us during this time and into the future. And so we want to let you know if you have questions about why we did that or what the details about that. We'd love for you to reach out to an elder or to a member of the finance team. That's Eric Augustine, Stephen Webb, or Sandy Miller. We are beginning the budget process. Eric and his team will be beginning that as normal, and we'll have some information on that as the budget draft is out in May, and we'll do a Zoom meeting about it unless we're able to be together in June. So you can give thanks to God and his provision, and just if you have questions about it, you can let folks know. Last thing, just a reminder for Sunday communities this morning at 11 o'clock, we'll have 4 different groups actually. The Experiencing God group will get on. And that's 11 to 12. Friends with and without disabilities are able to join in with that. Grace Kids will have their time. High school guys will go, and high school girls. So high school guys will follow the same link that's been there. High school girls should know Aaron Swarzeski is leading that time at 11 o'clock. There is something I would love for you guys to think about. We're contemplating and have a leader for it if there's desire for folks who do the sermon response guide, but maybe want to do it together. Rather than just with your family. That's obviously great to do as a family and as a household, but maybe folks who are single, folks who are empty nesters who want to kind of do a small group. It would happen next Sunday right after the service. And if you're wanting to do that, then let me know that just by text or email this week, and we'll make that happen if there's enough interest in that. That would happen like right as the service is over for 20-30 minutes, with the way that a lot of households are doing. Okay, I think that's all. That's a lot. I want to switch over to Aaron Holler, who's going to kind of give a ministry update for us right now.
Good morning, friends. Our ministry partner, many of you are familiar with For Richmond. They coordinate churches around the region to address issues within the community. And so before the pandemic, they were focused on foster care, and they last month shifted their efforts towards coordinating a regional response from churches to care for the community during the pandemic. So I have been representing GCPC on weekly calls with other Hanover County churches and some Hanover County offices as well. So I would just want to update you this morning on what that effort is looking like, and then offer some individual ways that we can be helping. So first, I actually want to, and Rob's put up, this is For Richmond's response plan. And if you look at the bottom of the screen right now, that team of church response staff, that shows those are the weekly calls that I just mentioned. And there are about 12 or 15 churches from Hanover that are on those calls each week. And then Rob, if you'll scroll back up, what we talk about on those calls are needs that are funneled to the group through individual church members. And so the flow that For Richmond is coordinating is needs are heard of by individual church members, or bringing them to their churches. Larger needs are being discussed at a church-wide and county-wide level. And then even wider than that, For Richmond down the pipeline is also coordinating calls between regional locality officials as well. So I wanted to share kind of what that flow is. But what they're asking us to do as individual church members is to commit to praying for and even connecting with the neighbors on our block. And so on their website, and I think Rob's going to pull it up for us, they have a place where you can sign up to adopt your block. And in that adoption, you're committing to pray for and even connecting with the people that live around you. So this is, we're zoomed in on GCPC's footprint on this map, but you could go to this website, forrichmond.org/loveyourneighbor, and see the whole Richmond region. You would see dozens of churches within the For Richmond network. Here in our footprint, you can see a couple of churches. Those are those blue diamonds. In the bottom right, you see GCPC. And then just above that, you see some green blobs. That's Clint's neighborhood. That's where he has signed up to, and it looks like maybe a few of his neighbors have also signed up to care for the people on their street and pray for the people on their street. If you look up towards Elmont, you see some other green blobs. That's the neighborhood that I live in, and you can see Rob signed up to adopt our street. And I actually shared this opportunity on our neighborhood's Facebook page a couple of days ago, and I'm really pleased to see somebody else in the neighborhood has signed up to adopt their street. And so it's a way that we can be intentional about loving our neighbors right now. And you all are probably aware that the needs in Hanover are comparatively low right now. As quarantine continues and financial or health situations become more precarious, that may change, needs may increase. But regardless of even if that doesn't change, we are presented with an extraordinary relational opportunity right now as Christians to be reaching out to our neighbors and caring for them. It all ties in and links back to what we've been talking about throughout the pandemic about loving God and loving others. We want to take care of people within our church. That's one of the rules of the Mercy Fund. That's a focus of each of our ministries: men's ministry, women's ministry, and Grace Kids. But we also want to care well for those who are outside of the church. So as you talk to your neighbors, if you hear of needs that are greater than what you can address as an individual or as a family, the hope is that you would bring those to GCPC, and we would look to care for those needs either directly from GCPC or through this wider network of churches that we get to be a part of. So I just want to highlight a couple of immediate needs, some ways that we can be helping right now. And right at the top of that list is definitely being intentional about talking to and praying for our neighbors. And then also broadening out a little bit is caring for one another within our church. There's an opportunity to do that right now through providing meals for the Pieces as they welcome Annie. And but please remember too that the Mercy team is available and wants to be caring for us within our church. And I think you should have received an email about that earlier this week. So broadening out from our church and into the larger county, I want to make you all aware of a website called hanoverhelps.org. And that is a site where individual needs are being paired with willing volunteers and helpers. So you could visit that if you would like to and sign up there to help or express a need. Another potential need down the pike within the county is Jen Dowda is helping to pilot the county's new food distribution program. And so as that kind of gets grounded and if need increases there, it will be a place for us to plug in and serve within our county. And then even broadening out further than that to the Metro Richmond region, another one of our ministry partners, the Northside Outreach Center, has put out a call for breakfast food items that they need to distribute within that community. And so Peter Quinn is coordinating our effort to meet that need. He's placed some bins on the front porch of the ministry house. So if you would, if you feel led to donate some breakfast food items, that would be great, particularly over the next week or so. So those are a few immediate, tangible needs that to be met, but there are always going to be relational needs. And so now is a great time to take advantage of people being in their homes, take advantage of people being in their neighborhoods more. It's a time for us to connect with and care for our neighbors in kind of a different place right now. That's actually what's at the heart of For Richmond's ministry, is this idea of caring for those around us. And it's at the heart of our church's involvement with the For Richmond ministry. So I've thrown a lot at you. If you have questions about any of that, please don't hesitate to reach out. To encourage you to visit the For Richmond website and consider adopting some streets around you. Let's close the prayer. You pray with me, please. Father, thanks for this opportunity to care for those around us. We know, Lord, this opportunity always exists, but it is uniquely there for us right now, as you have, in some cases, freed up time, and in all cases, brought together physically people into closer proximity as they're spending more time. So we're spending more time in our homes and in our neighborhoods. God, thank you for this network of churches, both here in Hanover and in the larger metro region. And thanks for the opportunity to be a part of that. Jesus, you tell us that your church is going to be known by how we love one another and how we care for others. And so would you help us to do that well now? Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Erin, for that update, and thanks, Erin, also for time that she's put in. The elders and deacons sort of asked her, and she was willing to sort of be our staff representative, both on a county level and on a Metro Richmond level for this. So that's a lot of information, because she's been in part of lots of conversations that she can share with you. And you know, the heart of it is really loving, as we talked about, even the very first week we did a Zoom. I think we're our second week, we did love God, love others. And that's obviously our call beyond at any time in our country and world, but particularly helpful now. I actually there's 3 levels of sort of what they suggested on that website. I took a sample letter, made it my own, copied it, printed it, and delivered yesterday up and down my street. Turned out to be about 40 homes. I think I took more folks than I thought I was taking, of just putting notes that just sort of introduce myself. I know my neighbors 2 or 3 away from my home, but not around the bend. And who knows? I mean, I've walked the street many times over 15 years, but some folks I know, but some folks I don't know. I'm praying for folks on my street as we just pray for our neighbors, and God might bring me into a different kind of relationship, or a way to be able to love my neighbor that I wasn't aware of. I'm aware just of my kind of neighbor's 2 way. So we'll see how God does that. So in some sense, it's just doing what God has always called us to do, but there's a different focus on it, and some support. And so you can lean on Erin for some of that as you lead into that. And we would like to be a part of it. We're going to continue our worship by continuing our series in the Beatitudes. Beatitudes, of course, are the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. And that's Jesus' most famous sermon, chapters Matthew 5 through 7. We're just going to look at the first 12 verses of the Sermon on the Mount over the next 7 or 8 weeks. It's his manifesto on real living. It's what life is like with him in the kingdom. If you're with us last week, you'll remember that we kind of introduced this term blessed, and we introduced it as an objective proclamation from the outside on someone's life, that life is going well for that person. Look at that guy. Look at that woman. Though our culture might use terms like they're so lucky or they're charmed. And I talked about my Nikes and my Intellivision, and how that's what I thought to be blessed at age 9 and what I sought after. Jesus has his own series of blessings. He has 8 of them. He says, life is going well if this is true of you. And it was shocking to hear this first one is, blessed are the poor in spirit, right? Blessed are you if you're bankrupt, right? And we talked about the tax collector beating his chest and his eyes down. He can't look up at heaven. He says, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. That Beatitude's sort of like saying, blessed are the spiritual zeros, right? It's kind of what Jesus is saying. If we ever rebrand as a church, I'm thinking that could be a new logo for us, a new tagline to replace the D's. GCPC, blessed are the spiritual zeros. We could put it on our softball team, RIP, a softball team. We don't have a softball team this year, but we could put that on. It actually match the number of runs we usually score in an inning, which is 0. So it would do well for there. We're actually very helpful to have the hiatus this year because a lot of us are getting older, and it lets our younger baseball guys, so we have 3 or 4 baseball guys who are high school guys, it lets them get a little older and closer to eligibility. Brad Best used to roam left field 2005 to 2009. We kind of need John Best to start roaming that in 2021, and Duffy and Ashton and their friends Carter and James and Jake, and then we'll see the spiritual zeros that are the softball team rise up. So you guys can tell your friends that's going to be on the front of our new jerseys, spiritual zeros. But on the back, if you had a shirt like that, and it would be a pretty cool shirt, you got to admit, the back would actually say something else, right? It would say, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, because that's what Jesus said last week. All these Beatitudes have these sort of rather stark blessings that we have to sort of say, I'm not sure I want that blessing. The second half sort of completes it. It's almost like prerequisites for receiving the blessing and for being blessed, or what you get because that is true of your life, right? In and of themselves, being poor in spirit in today's Beatitude morning aren't good, right? Objectively, it's who they connect you to. Jesus, who himself becomes poor in spirit, like we saw last week. Jesus, the mourner. Jesus, the meek. And it's what Jesus connects us to the kingdom, to comfort, to inheriting the earth, as we'll see next week. So our beatitude this morning is this. It's pretty short. You can memorize it pretty quickly. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And so we're going to ask the question, what does it mean to mourn, and where does mourning take you? What is mourning? We know that word. The Greek word mourning actually means to grieve with a grief which so takes possession of the whole being that it cannot be hid. Let me read that again. To grieve with a grief which so takes possession of the whole being that it cannot be hid. You can't hide it. Blessed are people who mourn so much that everyone knows what's going on. Some of us, most of us perhaps, try to hide what's going on, especially if we're feeling sad or if we're tempted to mourning. We feel awkward, we feel embarrassed, we don't want to let people in to that. We don't even acknowledge that it's going on. Jesus says you're missing out when you hide it. Blessed are you when it can't be hid, when it's not possible for you to not mourn and everyone to know it around you. That's intense, right? That's intense mourning. I'm trying to think about a few times in my life where I mourned like that. And 2 came to mind this week. They're actually my maternal grandparents. When my grandfather died and my grandmother died unexpectedly at different times, my mom's parents, I can remember where I was. I was in Geneva at a seminary course when I got word that my grandfather unexpectedly died, and I couldn't stop mourning. It couldn't be hid from me. And I was at my uncle's house when I got news that my grandmother had died unexpectedly. And I can remember the feeling, and it was a mourning that couldn't be hid. And Jesus says, blessed are you when that's true of you. It's kind of odd, isn't it? And mourning here is broader than just simply death. It affects our living too. There's spiritual mourning. It's very fitting for our times that we're in right now. There's a loss of folks. Certainly people are dying from COVID, from other things as well. There's separation from people. My stepmother is back in the hospital, and she's separated from us. She's separated from my father. She's separated from her only son. Her only son, her biological son, has a father who's dying, right? There's mental anguish at this time. There's economic toll on people and their businesses that create mourning. There's a loss of connection. There's missed experiences. There's weddings that have happened with 10 people instead of 100 people that were expected. There's births. We've had one this week. It didn't happen in an ordinary way. Of course, we still celebrate Annie, but there's differences in that. And there's funerals where people who want to come together at the loss of someone can't come in the same way. Of course, there's plenty of mourning in non-COVID times as well, because mourning is a result of brokenness in our world, friends. We see it physically, decaying bodies, socially, in our relationships, psychologically within our own selves, our own psyche, and in our relationship with God himself. Aren't there so many things that can break our heart? Luke has a sermon, it's called the Sermon on the Plain. It's different, slightly different than the Sermon on the Mount. It's probably a different time, but it's similar kind of sayings. And in the Sermon on the Plain, not on the mountain, Luke has it this way, that has Jesus saying this, so he probably said this at another time: blessed are you who weep now. Blessed are the weeping ones, is what he literally is saying there. You sort of ask that question, do I want to be associated with this? Do I want to be a weeping one? Is that a blessing that I want? Friends, our land typically, maybe not right now, but typically America is a very optimistic land, has an optimistic reputation. Some people say naive, but on the dignity side of it, it means that we're an optimistic people. Most of our movies end well. Most of the world's movies don't end well. They end bittersweet more than not. The gospel is deeply optimistic, pervasively so, but it does not try to make an end run around the reality of mourning. If it did, it would not account for what we experience in this world. Right now, what we experience, last year, what we experience, next year, what we'll experience. Heartache is not new in our world. The gospel and Jesus go right through it to something else. He obliterates it, as we shall see. But first, we have to see that there is what there is to mourn. Friedrich Brunner, in his commentary on Matthew, Rob's going to put up this quote, says this about mourning versus maybe something that we might be thinking about mourning, sort of a counterfeit of mourning. He says this: Jesus beautifies mourning, not moping. He does not counsel the long face. He does, however, bless real sadness, a state that can as easily coexist with an outwardly happy life as do all the other normal contradictions of life. The deepest joy may reside in persons with the deepest sadness. Sadness and joy are not mutually exclusive. They are often cause and effect. Jesus lends his authority to the perception that it is those for whom sadness is deep that God is real. Those for whom sadness is deep, that God is real. Blessed are those who mourn. God isn't blessing the long face, right? Eeyore is not in view, as we talked about last week in Winnie the Pooh, just sort of moping around. Nor is Pooh in view, though, right? Pooh sort of has this attitude of life is great, nothing is wrong. I can't see that anything's wrong because if I admit something's wrong, then I have to deal with it. That's not being advertised as what's blessed either. It's probably more like Christopher Robin, not moping, but mourning. Real sadness coexisting with joy, another of the contradictions of life, Brunner says. The deepest joy may reside in persons with the deepest sadness. That is those for whom sadness is deep, that God is real. How is that possible? How does that actually play out in our life? Let me give you an example from your life and my life this week. Think of your own sin. No one likes thinking of their own sin because it brings you into mourning if you really deal with your own sin. Think of my sin, I think of my sin towards my wife or my children or those close to me, towards you even. When you contemplate the effects of your sin, your selfishness, your passive sin, not loving those for whom you're called to love, or actively not loving someone, it brings deep sadness, mourning, right? I was with some folks recently who the effects of their, in a marriage, the effects of their lack of love for one another and sinning against one another, you could see it on their face, you could see it in their countenance, in their body language. I thought about it for me as towards one of my children this week, just the effects of my sin. And as God's Spirit showed me that, I mourned my sin. There was sadness in it. Like Peter, I felt like, Lord, depart from me, for I am a sinful man. But like Peter also, God became more real to me this week when I saw that, when I experienced that, when I let myself go into the mourning of my own sin. If you don't deal with the sadness that your sin produces in your life and in the life of other people, then you have to minimize it and act like it's not a big deal, right? Or you have to do what I often do, which is blame the other person. It's not my sin, it's your sin, right? Or you move into deep despair, seeing your sin but seeing nothing else. Mourning is something more. There's sadness and joy mixed. It's a realization that God is real in the midst of mourning, even over your sin. He does something when we sin. He forgives it, right? We've been watching, as we've talked about, the series on called Chosen. And when Peter is called, he says something, he goes back home to his wife, and of course this is fictional, we don't know exactly what happened, but you can imagine he went back to his wife after he met Jesus and said something about her, particularly since he started following Jesus and had to explain that he was leaving to follow this rabbi, this itinerant Jewish guy who just dumped a whole bunch of fish in his boat. And he says something interesting that stood out to me this week. He's talking to his wife and he says, I told him I was a sinner and he asked me to follow him. It didn't compute for Peter. I told him I was a sinner. Get away from me, depart from me. And he said, follow me. Right? Because even in his mourning that Peter had, Jesus brought the second half of this beatitude. For they shall be comforted. Jesus has comfort for husbands who don't love well, for dads who are selfish with their time, for COVID people who hoard and self-care rather than serve. I'm not excusing my sin or your sin or anyone's sin, nor does Jesus. I'm mourning it. Mourn the way that it affects others. Reminds me that I need a savior, that I need help, some relief, some real COVID relief. We only know comfort through sadness. Don't cut yourself off from comfort. You do so when you skip mourning, though, friends. When you skip mourning, you actually cut yourself off from comfort. I know I want to self-protect. Who wants to look at their own sin? I'm quick to run to busyness, to routine, even during COVID time. Netflix has picked up 16 million more subscribers. Some of that's real. We have more time. We want to sit and watch some shows. We've done it as a family. Some of those running from opportunities to think deeper, to read something, to deal with your sin, to be led into mourning. This beatitude is like all the Christian life. It's not just about me and my experience. Blessed are those who mourn for what's going on in their lives around them. Erin was reminding us of that. She was calling us to the mourning around you. Mourning you might not even know about your neighbors because they might be hiding it too. Frustration in their homes, in their marriages, domestic violence and child abuse is rapidly up because people are around each other more. Who knows exactly what's going on in the lives of your neighbors around you? Maybe their financial situation is different than you thought. There's mourning going on. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted, especially if they're brought by the comfort of those who follow Jesus. And just like being poor in spirit isn't the end of the story, nor is mourning the end of the story. Blessed are those who mourn has an ending. It's comfort, right? It's comfort that's centered on Jesus. In a second, we're going to watch a clip from a movie called Amistad. Let me set up the clip that we're going to watch. Amistad was a movie out in 1997. It was a huge hit, and if you haven't seen it, you ought to see it. You ought to have some caution if you have younger children in seeing it. But in the story, it's a historical drama about set in 1839 about the Mende tribesmen who were taken were being in the slave trade. They're being brought over from Africa, and on the way to Cuba, they gained control of the boats among their slaveholders, and they took control. They ended up in America, and there was a trial about what should be done with them. And they're in prison in this scene. And Cinque, who's the main character, talks about these long-faced people who keep on coming in. He said, look, the long-faced people are here again. He's actually talking about white Christians who are coming to mourn, in some effect, the locking up of these slaves in their case. So they actually have some concern for them. But all he sees is their mourning, their long face. They're mourning what's happening in their world and what's happening to these Mende tribesmen. But in the scene, we're going to see Cinque and another one of his friends find Jesus. And in finding Jesus in their mourning, they find comfort. So Rob's going to show this for us.
Chindanunga Timoningo wale. Hindegbi Otelo Jitingi Laini.
Yemia.
Go. Ke. Follow Atogima Hindagbi. B. Ta jama anunga tabao. Atima vele. Ta denga vingiwe. Ajia boyeya. Kehindawya. Tigi huwa dema we. Tigi ili bi.
Nyamuge.
Be. Omu avoi. Bomu pieni. Nagbi pie. Tingiwa alofa. Lilongo bito se atigiwa.
Nyamba. Tenaji.
Tole. Yagboyole. Tingiwa me boylo. Boyjima.
Confite a Dio Onnipotenti, Beate Maria sempre Vergine.
Tiliangie. Kui hun.
Beato Michele Arcangelo.
Tibembe kule hun se amu apie.
Beato Ioanni Baptiste.
Tatoa ha.
Sanctis
Che
Apostolis Omnibus
boylo.
Sanctis et vobis
Nunga ayama.
mea culpa, mea maxima culpa.
Tiepe.
Ideo precor Beatam Mariam semper Virgine.
Che ilenga gilego hun.
Arcangelo. Beatum Ioannem Baptistam. Sanctos Apostolos Petrum et Paulum. Omnes sanctos et vos fratres. Orare pro me ad Dominum Deum nostrum. Confiteor Deum.
Mimia.
Beate Maria
Pia fe alina. Jibaha.
Arcangelo. Beato Ioanni Baptiste. Sanctis Apostolos
Timua.
Petrum et Paulum. Omnibus
Wali
sanctis
pillo.
et vobis fratres. Qui peccavimus cogitatione.
Nyamunyo. Nyamunyo.
Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Then he was born and everything changed. Right, friends? We looked at this a few weeks ago at Easter. When Jesus is born into our world, he mourns too, right? He goes to where his Lazarus has died, and he sees her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping. He was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled, and he said, "Where have you laid them?" Then he said to them, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. So the Jews saw and said, "See how he loved him." Jesus wept, the shortest verse you could ever memorize in the Bible. He could not hide it, right? Just like I could not hide it when my grandparents died. He could not hide his mourning. Even though he's going to raise Lazarus in just a few moments, his mourning was real. It's the Father who sees the brokenness of the world, death that sends his son and sends his son to relieve it. And then he gets angry, right? He was deeply moved in his spirit, and still angry, he raised Lazarus. Jesus does not make an end around suffering and mourning. He voluntarily and deliberately enters into mourning to bring about our comfort. You see, friends, that no other religion has no other category for this. There's nothing else. If you're a Buddhist, it's this kind of mourning is just an illusion, right? It's like Winnie the Pooh a little bit. In our culture, it's a kind of Buddhism light. It's sort of busy yourself, distract yourself. Don't admit that anything's actually wrong in your friendships, in your marriage, in your work. Just keep going. Don't see the morning. Other faiths are more active. They say, see the morning, do something about it. There's marquees even around our county you can ride and see on our high schools, and they're not bad. They're good advice, but it's kind of like that when it gets tough, the tough get going, right? Do something about it. It's decent advice, but it's not enough when you really mourn, when you really face it. Only Christ is enough for the Mende tribesmen as they learn, and only Christ is enough for us to bring us comfort. This isn't an American film. It doesn't have a happy ending with no real pain or consequences. Our life is not that way, friends. Friends die. Friends betray Jesus. They don't understand him. Ultimately, even the Father leaves him, as we saw, my God, why have you forsaken me? He lives out the first part of this beatitude so that we can live and know the second. He enters into mourning so that you can know comfort. He still has the wounds in the resurrection. And so we mourn a little bit. It's a little bit weird. It's a little bit bittersweet. I get a lot of flack from my family because I always love bittersweet movies and I love bittersweet songs. One of my favorite Zac Brown songs is called Bittersweet. And it's not the typical light song from Zac Brown Band, but I like it because I taste the sweetness more even in the bitterness. And friends, we do that in the gospel. It's sweeter because he dealt with the bitter, and he deals with it so well, friends, that it's not even bitter to us. It's just actually sweet. We heard that in the call to worship. We heard that in Come As You Are. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't cure. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't cure. Do we believe that now? Do you believe that now? Will you believe that the next time you mourn? You will if you're blessed. You will if you're identified by the marking of the gospel, by the marking of Jesus' people, which he says as he declares his kingdom here. Then you can find comfort, or better yet, comfort finds you. Jesus doesn't deny the need to mourn. That would be an insult. Like Job's friends to Job. He doesn't just say, endure it, you can't. He obliterates it with his suffering even to death, but he is raised after the morning. There is comfort now and in our future. One of my favorite Psalms, Psalm 30, ends this way. The echo of it was also in Come As You Are. I noticed it as Mez sang it. He says this, you have turned my mourning into dancing. You have loosed my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness, that my glory may sing your praise and not be silent. O Lord, my God, I will give thanks to you forever. Deep sadness and deep joy intermingled in. First, it takes you to Jesus, and then it takes you to others. Let the fact that it takes you to Jesus this morning take it to others, namely those you live with, those you're still working with, those in your neighborhood that Aaron encouraged us to be a comfort. Paul writes this in 2 Corinthians. You can count, it's actually a larger passage than this, but Rob's going to put it up. You can count the number of times comfort is used in Paul's writing here. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. It's actually hard to read because you get tripped up on how many times comfort is put there. That's a man who knew this beatitude in his life and this reality in his life. Be comforted by the life and death and resurrection of Jesus, by where you are going, future comfort that is coming. Don't mourn as those who are not and will not know comfort. So you can go out and be those who give comfort in our world these days to your neighbors and every day to the ends of the earth. Let us pray. God, we thank you for this kind of comfort, that it comes from you alone. We can't well it up. We can't bring it up. We're blessed as we lean into mourning, as we deal with mourning, as we mourn, and it can't be hid. You come and meet us in the midst, and then you make everything well, everything good. In Jesus' name, amen. Friends, we're going to close our service by singing a song. Mez is going to lead us this morning again.
Thanks, Clint. Clint, that just really, that struck a chord with me, just because we are in such a strange time, and at times feel very disoriented. And I go into fix it mode and wanting to just make things better or quote unquote normal. But what I really need to do is be vulnerable. What I really need to do is mourn, because to mourn is to be vulnerable, and to be vulnerable is to mourn, to shed tears, and to do it among others in community. Because as Clint just said, we get to do that as people who know that one day all will be well. And so let's keep that in mind as we go into this next song of singing All Must Be Well. So please sing with me.
Is his favor always was. Precious is the blood that healed us. Perfect is the grace that sealed us. Stronger hands stretched forward to shield us. All must be well. Though we pass through tribulation, all will be well. Ours is such a full salvation, all is well. And be still in God confiding, fruitful if in Christ abiding, steadfast through the Spirit's guiding, all must be. We expect a bright tomorrow, all will be well. Faith can sing through days of sorrow, all is well. On our Father's love relying, Jesus every need supplying. Yes, and living or in dying, all must be well. On our Father's love relying, Jesus every need supplying. Yes, and living or in dying, all must be well.
Amen.
Amen, friends. And as a reminder this morning that all is well, our benediction is future looking in Revelation 21. Before we end, I want to encourage you, we can stick around and talk. We also have different Sunday communities. And if you're in need of prayer, reach out to me, reach out to one of the elders or a friend and ask for prayer this morning. But hear this future comfort, this future reality that all is well and all will be well. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. Go in that reality, that knowledge, and that peace, friends, this morning and every morning. Amen.